If Heracles was the strongest hero Greece ever produced, then Theseus of Athens was the most complete. He possessed not only strength and courage, but also intelligence and cunning, the qualities that would make Athens the greatest city in all of Greece. But before he could unite the scattered villages of Attica into a single kingdom, before he could face the Minotaur in its labyrinth, he first had to discover who he truly was. His story begins with his father, King Aegeus, who had ruled Athens for many years. Having tried and failed countless times to father an heir to whom he could leave his kingdom, believing he was incapable of having children, Aegeus travelled to Delphi and asked the oracle for help. She instructed him to journey to the small kingdom of Troezen, where the city's princess, Aethra, would bear him a son. Overjoyed, Aegeus travelled to Troezen and met with Princess Aethra, and the two conceived a child that night. However, unknown to Aegeus, Poseidon also visited Aethra that same evening. The child that was born, Theseus, carried the blood of both men, mortal king and sea god alike. With Poseidon's divine essence running through his veins, Theseus would be granted immense agility and strength, gifts that would prove essential in the trials ahead. But King Aegeus, knowing it was his duty to return to Athens, left the princess to raise the boy alone. Before departing, he placed his sword and sandals beneath a massive boulder. "Only when the boy is strong enough to lift this stone," he told Aethra, "will he be worthy of travelling to Athens to claim his birthright. These items will be the symbols by which I can recognize my son." The sword and sandals. Theseus grew into a smart and capable young man, and sure enough, when he finally reached manhood, he was strong enough to lift the rock and claim his father's possessions. Bidding his mother farewell, he set out on the long road to Athens, ready to claim his birthright. But when Theseus finally arrived in Athens, he found the palace gates heavily guarded and his father nowhere to be seen. The king, he learned, had married during the years since his visit to Troezen. His new queen was a woman named Medea, a sorceress from the distant kingdom of Colchis at the edge of the world. Medea's history was dark and stained with blood. She had once been a princess in her homeland, where she fell in love with a Greek hero named Jason, who had come seeking a treasure called the Golden Fleece. She used her powerful magic to help him steal it, betraying her own father and even killing her own brother to ensure their escape. Together they fled to Greece, where Jason married her and she bore him 2 sons. But Jason's love did not last. When he abandoned Medea for a younger princess, the sorceress took terrible revenge. She murdered Jason's new bride with a poisoned gown and killed her own children to punish their father. With all of Greece hunting her for these crimes, she fled to Athens, where she used her magic and beauty to enchant King Aegeus into marriage. She had since borne him a son named Midas, who was now heir to the throne. When Medea learned that Theseus had arrived claiming to be Aegeus's legitimate son, she saw him as a threat to everything she had built. She had killed to protect herself before, and she would do no less to secure the throne for her son. When Theseus requested an audience with the king, Medea quickly intercepted him. "My husband sees many young men who claim to be his long-lost son," she said with false sweetness. "If you wish to prove yourself worthy of an audience, you must first demonstrate your strength. There is a mad bull terrorizing the countryside near Marathon, killing farmers and destroying crops. Slay this beast, and the king will receive you." She sent him to face the bull of Marathon, hoping he would never return. But Theseus, drawing on his divine strength and speed, managed to slay the creature after a fierce battle. When he returned to Athens with proof of his victory, Medea realized a more direct approach was needed. As Theseus finally stood before King Aegeus in the throne room, Medea herself brought forward a cup of wine to welcome him. "Drink," she said with a smile. "You must be thirsty after your victory." Theseus accepted the cup and raised it to his lips, but just as he was about to drink, Aegeus leaned forward in his throne, his eyes fixed on something at Theseus's side. "That sword," the king said, his voice trembling. "Where did you get that sword?" Theseus lowered the cup, surprised by the question. "It was left for me by my father, along with these sandals. They were hidden beneath a great stone in Trozen." Aegeus finished the sentence, leapt from the throne in excitement. Rushing forward, he went to embrace his son, knocking the cup from Theseus's hand as he did so. The wine spilled across the marble floor, and where it touched the stone, it began to hiss and bubble, eating into the marble like acid. The room fell silent as everyone stared at the corroding stone. Aegeus turned slowly to Medea. "You tried to poison him," he cried accusingly. "You tried to murder my son." "Your son?" Medea's face went pale as she realized her mistake. She had not known about the sword and sandals, had not known this young man truly was Aegeus's heir. "Leave Athens," Aegeus commanded. "Leave now before I have you executed." Medea fled that very night, her plans destroyed once again. She would return to Colchis, back to the edge of the world, having finally exhausted Greece's tolerance for her crimes. Aegeus embraced Theseus, tears streaming down his face. "My son, I thought I would never see this day." He declared Theseus his heir before all the court, and, for a time, Athens rejoiced. The tributes. But Theseus soon learned that Athens lived under a terrible shadow. His father told him the story with shame in his voice. "Many years ago," Aegeus explained, "Athens went to war with King Minos of Crete. We were defeated utterly, our army destroyed. Minos could have razed our city to the ground, enslaved our people. Instead, he offered us terms." The king's voice grew heavy. "Every 9 years, we must send him a tribute. 7 young men and 7 young women. They are taken to Crete and fed to a monster that lives beneath his palace." "What kind of monster?" Theseus asked. "They call it the Minotaur," Aegeus said. "It is said to be half man, half bull, the offspring of Minos' wife, Persephone, and a sacred bull sent by Poseidon. The creature is kept in an impossible labyrinth designed by the master craftsman Daedalus. No one who enters has ever found their way out. The tributes wander until they encounter the Minotaur, or until they starve to death, lost in the endless passages." "How many tributes have been sent?" Theseus asked quietly. "This will be the 3rd, his father replied. 28 of Athens' children have already been devoured. In a few weeks, 14 more will be chosen by lot and shipped to Crete." Theseus felt rage building in his chest. "No," he said, "not any more. I will go as one of the tributes. I will kill this Minotaur and end this horror." Aegeus seized his son's arm. "You cannot. I have only just found you. If you go to Crete, you will die like all the others." "I am not like the others," Theseus said, his voice firm. "I lifted the stone you said no ordinary man could move. I killed the bull of Marathon with my bare hands. I was born for challenges like this." They argued through the night, but Aegeus could not change his son's mind. Finally, with tears in his eyes, the king gave his blessing. "If you must go, then take this one comfort with you." He gestured to the ship being prepared in the harbour. "That vessel sails with black sails, as it has for the previous tributes, a symbol of mourning, but I will give you white sails as well. If you succeed, if you somehow slay the Minotaur and survive, change the black sails to white before you return. That way, when I watch for your ship from the cliffs, I will know from afar that you live." Theseus embraced his father. "I will return with white sails flying, I swear it." And so, as the 14 tributes were chosen and boarded the black-sailed ship, Theseus stood among them. The other young Athenians wept, knowing they sailed toward their deaths. But Theseus stood at the prow, his face set with determination, watching as Crete drew closer on the horizon. The Minotaur. When the black-sailed ship arrived at the harbour of Knossos, the 14 Athenian tributes were led through the streets to the palace. Crowds gathered to watch them pass, some jeering, others looking away in pity. These young men and women were already dead. Everyone knew that no one escaped the Labyrinth. In the palace throne room, King Minos sat waiting, a cruel smile on his face. He was an old man now, but his gaze was sharp and cold. This was a ceremony Minos enjoyed, looking upon the tributes Athens sent him, a reminder of his power over their city. "Welcome to Crete," Minos said, his voice deep. "I trust your journey was pleasant. Tomorrow at dawn you will be sent into the Labyrinth to meet my beloved Minotaur. I suggest you make peace with whatever gods you worship." The Athenian tributes stood in terror, but Theseus met Minos's gaze without flinching. "I am Theseus, son of King Aegeus and heir to Athens," he said clearly. "I have come not as a sacrifice, but as a warrior. Your monster will die tomorrow." Minos laughed. "How delightful! They usually weep and beg. This will make the entertainment all the more enjoyable." He waved his hand dismissively. "Take them to their chambers. Let them have one last comfortable night." As the guards led the tributes away, the king's daughter Ariadne found she could not take her eyes off the young man who had spoken so boldly to her father. There was something about him, his courage, his determination, that stirred something in her heart. That evening she could not stop thinking about him. She knew what awaited him in the Labyrinth. She had seen countless tributes enter over the years, hearing their screams as the monster devoured them. The thought of this brave young man wandering, lost in the darkness, eventually meeting the Minotaur's horns, filled her with unexpected anguish. She made her decision. That night, as the palace slept, Ariadne made her way to the chambers where the tributes were being held. She found Theseus sitting alone, sharpening his sword by lamplight, while his companions slept uneasily around him. "You should not be here, Princess," Theseus said quietly, looking up as she entered. "No, I should not," Ariadne agreed, stepping closer. "But I cannot stand by and watch you die. You're either very brave or very foolish to think you can defeat the Minotaur." "Perhaps both," Theseus said with a slight smile. "But I meant what I said. I will kill this creature, or die trying." Ariadne knelt beside him, her voice urgent. "The true threat you face is not the Minotaur. It is the Labyrinth itself." She pressed a ball of golden thread into his hands. "The maze is so vast and complex that all who enter become hopelessly lost. Most starve to death before ever encountering the beast. Take this thread, tie it at the entrance, and unwind it as you go. When you have finished, follow it back to freedom." "Why help me?" Theseus asked. "Because I cannot bear to see you die," Ariadne said, tears forming in her eyes, "and because I am also trapped here. My father rules with an iron fist, and I am sick of being the daughter of a man who delights in such cruelty. If you truly can kill the Minotaur, then all I ask is that you take me with you." She paused, as if summoning the courage for what she was about to say. "But I cannot come as a refugee to your city. I ask that you take me as your wife. I know it is bold, but I have royal blood. I would not shame you, and I—" She hesitated. "I believe we could be happy together." Theseus looked at her for a long moment. The offer was generous. A Cretan princess as his bride would strengthen his claim to the throne, and there was something about her courage, her willingness to betray her own father for what was right, that moved him. "When I kill the Minotaur," he said, "you will come with me to Athens as my wife. This I swear." He entered the labyrinth at dawn, tying the thread securely at the entrance before beginning his descent into darkness. The passages twisted and turned, branching off in every direction, the air growing thick and stale the deeper he went. For hours Theseus walked through the winding paths, the thread unwinding behind him like a lifeline connecting him to the world above. Several times he came to intersections where 5 or 6 passages met, each one looking identical to the others. Without Ariadne's thread, he would have been lost within minutes. Finally, after what felt like an eternity in the darkness, the passage opened into a vast chamber at the labyrinth's heart. And there, in the centre of that space, the Minotaur waited. The creature was massive, far larger than Theseus had imagined. It had the body of a man, but scaled up to monstrous proportions, every muscle defined and powerful. But where a human head should have been, there was instead the head of a great bull, with curved horns as sharp as any spear. When it saw Theseus enter, it bellowed, a painful sound that was neither fully human nor fully beast, and then it began to charge. Theseus barely had time to draw his sword before the creature was upon him. He dove aside at the last moment, rolling across the stone floor as the Minotaur's horns passed inches from his body. The creature wheeled around with surprising speed for something so large, already preparing another charge. For what felt like hours they fought in that dark chamber. The Minotaur was stronger, but Theseus was faster, Poseidon's gift of divine agility allowing him to dodge blows that would have crushed any normal man. He darted in and out, striking where he could, slowly wearing the creature down. But Theseus was tiring too. His arms burned with exhaustion, and he had taken several glancing blows that left him bruised and bleeding. The Minotaur seemed inexhaustible, its rage only growing with each wound. Then the creature made a mistake. It charged again, head lowered, horns aimed at Theseus's chest, but instead of dodging aside, Theseus dropped to his knees and thrust his sword upward with both hands. The blade caught the Minotaur in the throat, driving deep. The creature's momentum carried it forward, impaling itself further on the blade. It staggered, blood pouring from the wound, and crashed to its knees. Theseus pulled his sword free and struck again, this time severing the great arteries in the beast's neck. The Minotaur collapsed onto the stone floor, its massive body shuddering once before going still. Theseus stood triumphant. Never again would Athens have to sacrifice its children to this monster. He found the thread where it had fallen during the fight and began following it back through the twisting passages. After hours of walking, he finally emerged into daylight to find Ariadne and the 13 other Athenian tributes waiting anxiously at the entrance. When they saw him alive, covered in blood but victorious, they erupted in cheers. That night, under cover of darkness, they escaped the island in their ship and began the voyage back to Athens. The fate of Ariadne. The voyage back to Athens should have been triumphant. The other Athenians sang songs of victory, laughing and celebrating their escape. Theseus joined them at first, but any time Ariadne approached, he grew cold and distant, staring off into the horizon. Ariadne watched him with growing unease. She had given up everything for him, her family, her home, her entire life. In those first hours after their escape, when Theseus had looked at her with gratitude and something that might have been love, she had believed it was worth it. But now, as Athens drew closer, she saw the way he looked at her changing. His smiles became forced. He made excuses to avoid her. She told herself she was imagining it, but deep down she knew the truth. He was regretting his promise. When they stopped at the island of Naxos to resupply, Ariadne felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps some time alone together, away from the others, would remind him of what they had shared. That evening they walked along the beach together in silence. Theseus seemed troubled, but when she reached for his hand, he did not pull away. "Tomorrow we reach Athens," she said softly. "I know your people may not welcome a Cretan princess at first, but I will prove myself to them." "You should rest," Theseus interrupted gently. "It has been a long journey. Tomorrow will be a difficult day." She wanted to talk further, but she had barely slept since leaving Crete, exhaustion weighing down upon her. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps things would seem clearer in the morning. She lay down on the soft sand, and, despite her anxiety, sleep took her quickly. When Ariadne woke, the sun was high in the sky. She sat up, disoriented, calling for Theseus. Only silence answered her. She ran to where the ship had been anchored and found nothing but empty water. No ship, no Theseus, no other Athenians. They had left while she slept, sailing away without a word. For a moment, Ariadne simply stood there, unable to comprehend what had happened. Then the full weight of it crashed down. Theseus had abandoned her. After everything she had sacrificed, he had waited until she was asleep and left her to die alone on this deserted island. She wept until she had no tears left. Days passed in a blur of despair. She searched the island for food and water, but found little. She built fires on the beach, hoping a passing ship might see the smoke. But none came. She was going to die there, alone, forgotten by the man she had given up everything for. It was then that Dionysus found her. The god of wine and revelry had been travelling through the islands when he saw the smoke from her fire. He found her on the beach, half-starved and delirious, calling out Theseus's name in her fever dreams. When he heard her story, divine rage filled him. "He left you here to die after you gave him everything?" Dionysus asked, his voice cold with fury. "I was a fool," Ariadne whispered. "I thought he loved me. I thought I mattered to him." "You matter," Dionysus said, kneeling beside her. "Theseus is a fool who threw away something precious because he was too blind to see its value. But I see it. Come with me." He brought her to Olympus, where he took her as his wife. Zeus himself placed a crown of stars upon her head, making her a goddess, the constellation Corona Borealis, forever shining in the night sky. She was given the immortality and honor that Theseus had denied her, becoming a goddess while he remained bound to the earth, destined to grow old and die like any other man. The return to Athens. King Aegeus spent every day after his son's departure standing on the cliffs overlooking the harbour. From dawn until the sun sank below the horizon, he would watch the sea, searching for any sign of a returning ship. The other Athenians whispered that the king was going mad with grief, that he should accept his son was dead like all the others who had entered the Labyrinth. But Aegeus refused to abandon hope. "He promised me white sails," he would tell anyone who tried to convince him to come inside. "If Theseus lives, he will change the sails. I will know the moment I see the ship." On the 15th day, a speck appeared on the horizon. Aegeus's heart leapt. A ship was approaching. He strained his eyes, trying to make out any detail. As the ship grew closer, he could see it was the right size, the right build. It could be them. It could be his son. Aegeus held his breath, willing himself to see white sails catching the wind. But the sails were black. Black as morning. Black as death. Beneath those very sails, Theseus stood at the prow of his ship, watching Athens grow larger on the horizon. His young heart raced with excitement. He had killed the Minotaur and saved his city. He was a hero. Songs would be sung about this day for generations. His thoughts of future glory were interrupted by one of his fellow Athenians. "The city is just ahead," the man said, grinning. "Your father will be so proud. Did you remember to change the sails like he asked?" Theseus felt his heart freeze. The sails! He spun around and looked up at the black canvas billowing above him. Horror flooded through him. In all the excitement of the victory, the escape and the romance with Ariadne, he had completely forgotten. The white sails his father had given him were still packed below deck, never raised. "No," Theseus whispered. "No, it cannot be." He screamed for the crew to change the sails immediately, but it was too late. They were already entering the harbour. Already he could see people gathering on the shore, pointing at the ship. Their celebration songs died away as they recognized the black sails. And on the cliffs above, Theseus saw a small figure in royal robes standing at the edge. "Father!" Theseus cried, but the wind carried his voice away. "Father! I'm alive!" The figure stepped off the cliff. Theseus watched in horror as his father fell, as the man who had waited 15 days for his son's return plummeted into the sea below. The waters that had carried Theseus home now claimed his father's life, and from that day forward they would be known as the Aegean Sea in King Aegeus's honour. The city of Athens mourned for 7 days. They had sent 14 young people to what should have been their deaths, and miraculously all 14 had returned alive. But they had also lost their king, and the joy of victory was swallowed by grief. When the mourning period ended, the priests declared that Athens needed a new ruler, and Theseus was Aegeus's only heir. The crown fell to him not in triumph, but in sorrow. As they placed the crown upon his head, Theseus thought about the cost of his victory. He had killed the Minotaur, freeing his city from Crete's terrible tribute, but he had also killed his father, abandoned the woman who had saved his life, and earned his throne through carelessness and betrayal. He was a hero now, celebrated throughout Greece, but the weight of his mistakes would never leave him. He had escaped the labyrinth in Crete, but the path he had carved through his own choices, from that there would be no thread to guide him. Theseus and Pirithous. Theseus, the king of Athens, was one of the greatest heroes Greece had ever produced. He had slain the Minotaur in the Labyrinth of Crete and united the scattered villages of Attica into a single kingdom. By the time he reached middle age, there were few challenges left that could test him, few monsters remaining that he had not already faced. It was this very success that led to his downfall. Theseus had formed a close friendship with Pirithous, the king of Lapiths, a warrior tribe from Thessaly. The two men were alike in many ways, both skilled in combat, both proud of their achievements, and both beginning to feel that ordinary mortal women were beneath them. They had each married and lost wives to death or circumstance, and now they decided that they deserved something more, something divine. "We are not common men," Pirithous said one evening as they shared wine in Athens. "We have achieved what others only dream of. Why should we settle for mortal wives when the daughters of Zeus walk the earth?" Theseus, his judgment clouded by the wine and his own pride, agreed. Together they made a pact. Each would help the other claim a daughter of Zeus as his bride. Their first target was Helen of Sparta. She was the daughter of Zeus and Leda, destined to become the most beautiful woman in the world and serve as the catalyst for the Trojan War. But for now she was still a child, barely 10 years old, although she was already renowned for her beauty. Theseus and Pirithous travelled to Sparta, abducted her from a temple where she was dancing, and brought her back to Athens. Theseus had his wife secured, leaving her in the care of his mother, whilst he and Pirithous planned the second abduction. This was where their arrogance became truly dangerous. "Helen was easy to take," Pirithous said. "Now I want a bride worthy of my achievement. I want Persephone herself." Theseus stared at his friend in disbelief. "Persephone?" he asked. "The queen of the underworld? Why not?" Pirithous replied. "She is the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, she is beautiful beyond measure, and she is trapped in that grey realm, married to a god who cares nothing for love or joy. I would be doing her a service, freeing her from that cold palace." It was madness, but Theseus had made an oath, and a pact between heroes is a sacred thing. Despite every instinct screaming that this would end in disaster, Theseus agreed to help. They made their way to Cape Taenarum, the same entrance to the underworld that Heracles and Orpheus had used, and began the descent into the darkness. The journey down was easier than it should have been. The path was clear, as if something was guiding them deeper. They crossed the river Styx without incident, with Charon unexpectedly ferrying them across without demanding payment. Cerberus, who should have torn them apart, merely watched them pass without complaint. "See?" Pirithous said confidently. "Even the guardians of the dead recognize we are no ordinary men. They let us pass out of respect." Theseus said nothing, but unease had begun to settle in his chest. The underworld was letting them in too easily. Why had Charon not demanded payment? Why had Cerberus ignored them? It felt less like respect, and more like a trap being set. They then reached the palace of Hades, and the great doors stood open, as if they were expected. Inside, the throne room was vast and cold, and seated upon his throne of black stone was Hades himself, with Persephone beside him. The god of the dead regarded them with that unreadable expression. "Theseus of Athens, and Pirithous of the Labyrinth," Hades said, his deep voice filling the chamber. "You honor me with your presence. It is rare for living heroes to visit my realm. Tell me, what brings you to the palace of the dead?" Pirithous stepped forward, his confidence unshaken. "Lord Hades, I have come to ask for your wife's hand in marriage. Persephone deserves better than this grey realm. I would take her to the world above, where she could know joy and feel the heat of the sun, not just for half the year, but always. I would treat her as a queen should be treated." The throne room fell utterly silent. Even the ghostly servants stopped their movements, turning to watch what would happen next. Hades leaned back in his throne, and when he spoke his voice was almost amused. "You wish to take my wife, to steal the queen of the underworld from her own palace? How bold!" He stood, his presence filling the room. "Very well, I appreciate boldness. But first you must be my guests. It would be wrong to conduct such important negotiations without proper hospitality." He gestured toward a doorway. "Please, come. Let us discuss this in a more comfortable setting. I have a chamber where we can speak privately." He led them from the throne room to a smaller, windowless chamber. Against the far wall sat 2 ornate chairs, beautifully carved from dark stone. "Please sit," the god said. "Rest from your journey. We shall discuss your proposal in comfort." Theseus felt his unease deepen into genuine fear. Something was very wrong. But Pirithous was already moving toward the chairs, and Theseus could not abandon his friend. They sat down together, the stone cool beneath them. The moment they settled into the seats, Theseus's worst fears were confirmed. He tried to stand and found he could not. His body would not obey him. He looked down and saw that he was not physically bound with chains or rope, but his flesh had somehow merged with the stone of the chair. He was part of it now, unable to stand or move, no matter how hard he tried. Beside him, Pirithous was experiencing the same horror, his eyes wide as he struggled uselessly against the chair that held him. "These are the chairs of forgetfulness," Hades said calmly, walking toward them. "They are reserved for those who show such profound disrespect to the gods that I feel they need time to reflect, time to forget their arrogance and understand what it means to be powerless." "Please," Theseus gasped, panic flooding through him. "I was bound by an oath. I did not want this. Let me go." "An oath?" Hades tilted his head. "You choose to honor an oath to steal my wife, rather than use wisdom to refuse a fool's errand? That speaks to your judgment, Theseus of Athens." He turned to Pirithous. "And you thought you could simply walk into my realm and take my queen? That I would allow this insult to stand? Your hubris is extraordinary." Pirithous tried to speak, but already his thoughts were beginning to cloud. The chairs were eating away at their memories, robbing them of everything that made them who they were. Hades went to leave the room. "You will sit there until you forget why you came. You will not even remember your own names. Perhaps in a few centuries, if I feel merciful, I will consider your release." Time ceased to have meaning. Theseus and Pirithous sat in the throne room of Hades, their minds slowly dissolving, their memories fading away with each passing moment. They became part of the furniture of the underworld, 2 more warnings to any who thought themselves above the laws of gods and death. Then, after what might have been years or centuries, Heracles descended to the underworld for his 12th labor. The great hero, having secured permission from Hades to take Cerberus temporarily, was making his way back through the palace corridors when he passed a small chamber. Through the doorway he noticed 2 figures seated in chairs. Unlike the countless spirits who drifted through the palace, these 2 seemed solid, real. Though their eyes were vacant and empty, something about them stirred a memory in Heracles. He stepped into the chamber and approached cautiously. "Theseus?" he said, studying the nearer figure. "Is that you?" At the sound of his name, something flickered in Theseus's empty eyes, a spark of recognition, of memory trying to return. Heracles gripped his friend's arm and pulled. The chair fought to hold him. Heracles could feel it, some dark magic trying to keep Theseus trapped, but he was the son of Zeus, the strongest man who had ever lived. With a roar of effort, he wrenched Theseus free from the stone. Theseus collapsed onto the floor, gasping, memories flooding back in a painful rush. "Heracles?" he asked in confusion. "What happened? How long have I been here?" "We can discuss that later," Heracles said, turning to Pirithous. "First let me free your friend." He gripped Pirithous' arm and pulled with all his might, but this time the earth itself began to shake. The palace walls trembled, dust fell from the ceiling. Then Hades' voice filled the chamber, speaking directly to Heracles. "Theseus was a fool, led astray by oath and friendship. Him I will allow you to take. But Pirithous conceived this insult. He dared to claim my wife. His punishment is eternal, and if you continue, I will add you, great Heracles, to these chairs as well." Heracles released his grip and stepped back. "I am sorry, friend," he said to Pirithous, though the man's eyes were too empty to show if he understood. "Your crime was too great. The Lord of the Dead will not release you." He helped Theseus to his feet and guided him from the throne room. Behind them, Pirithous remained in the chair of forgetfulness, his mind continuing to dissolve into nothing. Theseus wept as they climbed back to the surface. He had been trapped for so long he could not say how many years had passed. When they finally emerged into sunlight, he learned the truth. Helen had been rescued by her brothers whilst he sat powerless in the underworld. His kingdom had fallen into disarray, and his mother, whom he had loved above all others, was dead. Everything he had known was gone. He had survived the underworld, but at a cost that hollowed him out. He lived for a few more years, but the proud hero who had slain the Minotaur was gone, replaced by a broken man haunted by what he had lost. As for Pirithous, he remains in the throne room of Hades still, sitting in the chair of forgetfulness. His mind is long gone, his memories nothing but fragments. He has become part of the underworld itself, a permanent reminder of what happens when mortals let their pride convince them that they are equal to the gods. I've been David Rintoul for Deep Dive History. Thank you for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.